Okay, Paul Booth, welcome to the Ultra Running Sam podcast.
Excellent, thank you, Sam.
That's all right. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate you. I know you've had a busy day, so appreciate you coming on later on in the evening to give us some gems of information. So, firstly, then, for people. I mean, I only know you through Damian Hall. I'm following his exploits on Tor de Geants. So I know you were crewing for him and you provide nutrition advice for him. So for the viewers and for the listeners, could you just sort of explain who you are and how you have become who you are in ultra
running? Yeah, I suppose so. To go back quite a bit, for a long time, sports nutrition was kind of my side hustle, whereas my main job is a university lecturer. So I've worked at that for 22 years. So they work pretty well hand in hand, really, because again, the whole idea of nutrition is to educate people so people can kind of take that on, figure out, how to increase the performance, how to find better performance through just eating the right foods. In terms of that sort of journey, I suppose, it's, I first did a master's in nutrition, which was very much focused on biochemistry. So a lot about metabolism, quite a lot of physiology in there. And I did a second one, which was a lot more focused on professional practice and food and things like that. So that's sort of how I got into that area. My main focus in area of sports nutrition is really on ultra endurance. And there's a kind of few reasons for that, mostly because I think I've done about 80 ultras so far over the last, 12 years. I've been a fell runner for 20 odd years or so. And naturally fell run, you end up doing a few ultras like old county tops and stuff like that, which aren't really called ultras. And then proper sort of trail ultras. Maybe I've been doing those for about 12 years or so. So done a lot around the world. Done all the UTMB races, for instance, Bob Graham, stuff like that in the UK. But also, in terms of ultra nutrition, like the science and the research behind it, there's not very much. And I would actually say, in terms of an area to study, an area to research, it's probably the toughest part of, it's the toughest gig a sports nutritionist could have, purely because, if you look at football, it's worth a lot of money. There's tons of research about it. Everyone knows exactly how much energy a football player burns on the pitch. They know exactly how far they're going to run. The nutrition is pretty simple because you just say, right, get these carbs because they're running at a really sort of high pace, a high intensity. So they're going to need carbs. You can give them a few supplements to, buffer lactate and stuff like that. Whereas ultras, because there's no money in it, and actually it's a bit sort of a little bit underground, I suppose. It's not got that TV presence. There's only really a handful of people doing really kind of good, strong quality academic research into it. So as an area of focus, it's quite a niche area. And I think, well, I'd sooner kind of look at that and work within that space, because firstly, it's a space I'm interested in, but actually it's an area where you can still pretty much do new things, and apply some of that science, which has already been written for, football players or for marathon runners or for Ironman triathletes, for example. So that's kind of, I suppose, what brings me to this point. And that's one of the reasons why I was out with Damian doing Tor de Geants, as much as, being a friend of his and wanting to support him and go out and have a nice time in the Aosta Valley. A lot of that was about data collection, observation, to really look at what goes on at the elite end of, one of the world's toughest ultra marathons. As a single stage, multi-day event, they don't get much tougher than that. In the fact that, all those guys, some of them slept for, I think, 45 minutes in total across the whole race, which is unbelievable. So I got a really great insight into what they ate, how they competed, what they did, how they looked, how they felt. And again, there's so many studies that aren't able to go into that because people, they don't want to follow a whole race. but also it's not a controlled space. So it's outside the lab. So anything can change, things can happen, changes in the temperature, changes in pacing, changes in what people eat, tons and tons of different things. So, so I'm really interested in kind of getting out there as well as racing myself, going with other people and crewing and being able to make those observations, and also put various nutrition interventions in, such as I did with Damo, to see, will this help him beat fatigue? Will he pop up again and start running a little bit faster? Will it settle his gut issues? All these kind of different things. So again, as I say, it's kind of new ground, really, I suppose. And that's sort of why I'm in it. Long story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's ultra running is a niche, and then ultra running nutrition is a niche of a niche, isn't it? So not that you're the one only ultra endurance nutritionist out there. There's a few of you, isn't there? But it's not exactly like widespread, is it, knowledge? Because like you say, it's such a hard thing to study. People that want to study things want them in a controlled environment, don't they? And ultras and trail running is not a controlled environment at all, is it? Possibly, road running is as close as you could get to a controlled environment, isn't it? But even that is variables, isn't it? So I think you're up against it, certainly, aren't you? As far as trying to do it in the field. What do you think was what did you take away from your time with Damian out in Italy?
Yeah, quite a lot, really. I mean, I suppose the first thing really is when we say ultra, like, it's such an umbrella term, and nutrition for ultras can change so much. So, if I was going out and running the Limestone Trail, for example, that might take 7-8 hours or so. Whereas Tor de Geants, another ultra, I mean, Damian was on that for 4 days. If I was doing that, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 days or something like that. So completely different. And you would put in a completely different nutrition strategy as well. So this is the thing where a shorter ultra, like Limestone Trail or something, 45, 50 miles, actually, there's a lot of sort of textbook stuff about what you'd put in, and you can think about your pace, and you might go, oh, well, I'm going to aim for 60 or 90 grams of carbs an hour, or as a lot of people are trying now, 120 grams, which is something we can kind of come on to at another point. But with Tor de Geants, actually, the textbook kind of goes out the window, and rather than measure everything within sort of carbohydrates, the issue you've got is within day energy losses. So not only are you racing and using a ton of energy, actually you're not eating proper meals, you're not getting all that energy in. So normally, you would want to eat enough food so you've got enough energy to cover that run that you're about to have. Unfortunately, a lot of people put the food in after the run, so they're well equipped for the run after that, but not the run before. So within Tor de Geants, the first thing is, trying to get all that energy back in. And as much as a lot of the time I'd say, right, on a shorter race, aim for carbs. Don't worry about fat. Don't bother about protein. Whereas on Tor de Geants, actually, fat and protein are your friends on that, because they're just other ways which you can start putting energy back into the runner. The more carbs you can get in, the better. But actually, the focus is on energy rather than carbs. Taste fatigue plays a massive, massive part of it. So again, for Damian, for instance, after day one, he didn't really touch his gels again. That was it. Hit the gels day one. End of day one, got taste fatigue. Didn't really eat for 2 days then. So everything kind of went out the window. So at that point, it was simply me being in the van for a lot of hours, going to a lot of shops, cooking as much different things as I possibly could. Stuff that wasn't dry, stuff that could go down well, stuff that had a really good taste to it. So there is flavors that add fat, which is going to be more creamy. There is taste which are more savory tasting, such as protein. Try and get everything out, because the last thing he wanted was sweet stuff. So that's one of the things that hits first. And again, on a kind of shorter ultra, you get a bit of taste fatigue. Oh, I'm sick of these gels. But actually, on something really long, that taste fatigue is so bad that you put it in your mouth and you want to be sick, basically. That's how bad it becomes. So it's that which is going to start to stop you eating. So those first 2 days, for pretty much every competitor on Tor de Geants, it was tough. Mostly because, well, it's a tough race to start with. There's massive amounts of climbing on those first 2 days. Right at the front end, the top 10, the pace was pretty intense, particularly for a race that's that long. Also, in those first 2 days, it's the highest point. So you reach an altitude one night of, I think, 3,299 meters. So a lot of athletes are actually sick at that point from fatigue through running through the day, through the temperatures, and then having the altitude on top of that as well. It was 32 degrees in the valleys. It was getting up to like 34 for 35 degrees as well. So you've got the heat in there as well. So, you know, you've basically got a bit of dehydration going on. You've got gut damage going on. You've got thermoregulation, and so all the blood is going to move away from your gut, go to your working muscles, go to your skin to try and keep you cool. And that's going to heighten gut damage. You know, you've got the intensity of the race itself, you've got the anxiety of being at the elite end of the race, and then you've got the altitude to cope with, which is going to basically take up more and more energy. So people are going to get fatigued really quickly in those first 2 days, and it showed. And people, you know, when I say people, you know, from what I saw, the sort of top 10, the top 15 of the race were really struggling to get food in, apart from like a couple of the top guys. And what I noticed that was different about them. So, you know, most people would come into an aid station and treat it like, I mean, I don't know what you're like on ultra, but for me, I'll get into an aid station, I'll grab a few bits, put a couple of bits in my pocket, have a drink of Coke, and I'm out, you know, in and out within 2 minutes, no hanging about. A lot of people are treating it like UTMB, where, you know, 90 seconds are in and out. And actually, they weren't getting enough food down. So fatigue was starting to set in. And what you could see in the race was more and more people who'd started the first day, who might have been in like position like anywhere between sort of 25 and 35, let's say. They were gradually creeping up in the pace, and a few other people were starting to slip back. And what I noticed is the people who were doing really well were actually taking a lot longer at aid stations. So Simone, who came in second overall, every single aid station he went to, he was really cool, really calm. He would sit down. His crew would basically give him a meal with a little lid on it. They'd take the lid off, and it'd either be soup with rice in it, which is easy to get down. You know, use a spoon. If you can't do it, pour it down. You don't even need to chew the rice. You know, if you use short grain rice, it'll get into your bloodstream faster as well. Really easy to process. If he wasn't eating that, he was eating rice and chicken. Whatever he ate, it was rice. You know, but he would take his time. So rather than kind of come in from a race, and you'll get in to an aid station, you might, you know, you'll run in, you'll be rushing around, you'll feel a little bit queasy because it'll be hot, your adrenaline will be pumped up, you won't want to eat. Actually, he would sit there for 10, 20 minutes, however long it took, he would recompose himself, eat, you know, his crew would sort everything out, really, really cool, and then he'd be off again. Absolutely perfect. He put no pressure on himself. And actually, what I realized is all that time he took to stop and eat on a race like that, it paid back double later on in the race, because the times when other people might have been feeling fatigue through not eating enough, he was absolutely fine. You know, it continued to have, you know, kept his liver glycogen topped up, kept his blood sugar topped up. You know, he wasn't bonking at any point. So you never saw him looking really run down or really fatigued. I'm not even sure if he slept, but him and Jonas, the first guy, they created such a buffer in the end that, you know, from the last two checkpoints, they could basically take the foot off the gas. So again, that time and that sort of ripping up the rule book a little bit was probably the most important thing. And as I say, you know, getting protein and fat in over the course of a normal ultra. Again, if we're doing let's say a fast 35 miler, I would say to someone, avoid fat and avoid protein. because all they're going to do is slow your gut down. So you start taking a load of protein, loads of fat, it'll sit on your gut. It's got the potential then to cause GI issues. Might not cause GI issues for everyone, but those two different macronutrients are known for slowing your gut down. Over something longer, particularly Tor de Geants, they're a really great way of actually just putting more calories in and getting that much needed energy in, particularly if you're struggling to eat carbs. You think, right, I want to eat a hot dog. And Damian, I gave him vegan hot dogs on that, by the way. I once sneaking him in a meat ones, but it's that flavor profile and that difference. So a hot dog in a wrap is absolutely perfect. Or, rice, as say, rice in a tin of soup. Again, stuff you wouldn't dream to have on a normal, like a short ultra, unless you're out for a bit of a laugh. But if you were competing at the elite end, not a chance. Whereas in this, it's eat what you can and try and find foods which are high value, I suppose. So high value in terms of being energy dense, high value in terms of not being too satiating. So foods that aren't going to fill you up. So it's interesting. If you look at one of the most satiating foods is boiled potatoes, but one of the least satiating is mash. So again, changing boiled potatoes to mash, it means you can eat more. Changing bread for a wrap, you can eat tons of wraps, whereas actually bread, you might be able to do a couple of rounds. It's a little bit drier. So it's finding foods which aren't very satiating. So actually, you can put more in your gut. You can put stuff in your pocket to take away. It's easy to carry. And then obviously trying to beat taste fatigue with those foods as well. So giving athletes foods that, well, they want to eat, and they would enjoy, and they're not put off by the sweet flavor of it or it being too savory or whatever it may be. So it's about trying all these different things and trying to create like quite a large menu for the race. Because as much as you talk to your athlete before the race and say, right, what do you want? They're like, oh, I really like cheese sandwiches and I really like pineapple. You can guarantee after 10 hours, the last things that they want to eat is pineapple or cheese sandwiches. I've still got 3 packets of vegan cheese sat in my fridge. Have you ever tasted vegan cheese?
No.
No, you don't want it. It's not nice. It's not nice. So if there's anyone listening that wants 3 packets of vegan cheese, write to Sam. I'm happy to forward that on. So also, again, heat played a massive part in that. The hotter it gets, the more more your core temperature is going to raise, the less you're going to want to eat, basically. So again, gut training is really important for absorption of nutrients, but also to expand your gut a little bit. So when your gut does put the brakes on, actually you're able to put a little bit more in there. Asker Ukendrup, who quite literally wrote a book on sports nutrition. He compares that to sort of, Coney Island and hot dog eating competitions. The fact that someone can eat 60 hot dogs in 2 minutes or something like that. Again, that's all about training the gut and, expanding your gut to be able to take that load. And it's much like the races in this. It's about, expanding your gut and being able to take on a huge load of, food, but also hydration as well, which is going to be a key factor in that race, because dehydration is going to create more GI symptoms, which in turn is going to stop you eating, which is going to lead to fatigue and potentially, losing your position or DNFing from the race completely. And again, if you look at ultras, the main reason people DNF is through either GI issues or just fatigue at some point.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just going back to what you said about the guy that was in second and he'd taken his time in the in the aid stations. That's something that any ultra runner will sort of realize, that when you can be in the heat of battle, in the middle of an ultra, and you're feeling absolutely horrendous. You can't swallow anything. Everything makes you want to feel sick. But you get to the end, and then magically, like half an hour later, you're stuffing your face with food. So why haven't we kind of made that sort of connection that maybe all it is just taking our time? Obviously, if you're in a shorter race, if you're in like a 50K, you haven't got time to be sat in an aid station for 20 minutes, half an hour. But on a race like Tor de Geants, you've got that time, haven't you, to sit around. Not obviously you don't want to be sitting around for hours, but you could sit there for half an hour, let yourself settle down, let your core temperature come back down again, get to the point where you feel like you can face food again. Do you think that people are sort of missing a trick with, with these longer ultras by sort of rushing through and not taking that time to sit there and let your body sort of adjust and then want food again?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, taking that time, it seems to sort of go against the grain. You think, I'm in a race, I shouldn't be sitting around, having a 3-course meal. But actually, particularly for single stage multi-day races, taking that time, you're just buying time back at a later point, basically. And the fact that, you fuel in, and that's gonna keep you going. And the pace you're going, you might, Tor de Geants, if you look at people running that, even the elites, they were maybe doing 2 or 3 miles an hour, which is pretty slow, really. You think, oh, your nana could do better than that, but they've got massive climbs at the same time. There's 30,000 meters plus of climbing on that. But again, the overall pace of a race is slow, but it's the fact that that pace is pretty consistent and they're not sleeping, they're just going straight through. So yeah, but I do think, because it's over days rather than hours, taking that time just to sit down and have a really good meal, and as you say, kind of cool down, get your appetite back a little bit, it makes such a difference. But even on the short races, as you were saying, someone taking time out, the short race of 30 minutes might jeopardize the race. Sometimes it's worth it, because actually, all right, you're probably going to lose a load of positions, but the other option is you just end up DNFing and waste that race entry, go home ashamed, all these other things which may come with that. As an example, I was doing UTMB TDS this year, which I've not done for years. I've not done a new course. I'm not sure this year was a great year to do it because it was really hot. It's like 34 degrees, but it was a huge climb after Bourg-Saint-Maurice. I can't remember the name, but you get right up to the top and there's a little fort on the top and there's kind of goats living in there. And I got to the top of that climb and pushed it all the way up and carried on with the pace. Didn't stop at all. First thing I wanted to do was just hurl. But I thought, right, I'll sit in the shade for 10 minutes. I bought a can of Perrier and a can of Coke, sipped them a little bit at a time. 10 minutes later, I was absolutely fine. Absolutely ready to go again. I ate a little bit of food, carried on, but that's all it needed. If I'd carried on going, I would have felt rubbish. I would have puked. I would have thought, is this race for me? Maybe I want to ditch it. But just giving myself 10 minutes, I was pretty much a new man after that and carried on. It was absolutely fine. So it's just taking that little bit of time just to let your body cool down. Again, if you've got gut damage, the response to that, your cells in your gut can repair themselves pretty quickly. If you eat, it'll clear out some of the toxins from your blood. Again, the cytokine response from running, overexerting yourself a little bit will make you feel ill. It'll put you off your appetite. But if you just sit nice and calm, quietly in the shade, make sure you're somewhere cool. Find some way of cooling yourself down. Pour water over your head. If you've got a crew, what I did for Damo a lot was put an ice pack around his neck. All those different things will help you cool down, help you thermoregulate, and you'll get your appetite back, which is absolutely key. Otherwise, you're just facing, grueling race full of fatigue.
I know the heat is an enemy for most of us. I know myself, I've had experience of this in an ultra a couple of summers ago when races was sort of back on again a little bit. Went over to Wales and did North Wales and did race to the castle, as the locals call it, race to the transit van underneath the castle, to give it the correct actual where it goes. But on that, it was like super hot. It had been forecast to be like an overcast day in August, I think it was, and it was, I was sort of taken by, not taken by surprise, because you never should be taken by surprise by weather in an ultra, but it was hotter than sort of expected. It was like gloriously like blue skies and absolutely baking hot and a beach day and everything for everybody. And I had struggled with going out too fast, getting dehydrated, and then the dreaded queasiness came on, and started being sick, and thought, that's my race over. I was probably only about 6 miles from the end, something like that, but I was convinced that was my race over. I was just walking with my head down, retching, thinking I can barely walk, let alone run. And thought, whatever position I'd got, forget it, it's out the window, don't care anymore. I just literally just feel like getting on a train and getting to the finish. And the route went over and past a train station, and I almost did it was that bad. I got to the point where I was like, I could just get on the train and go to the finish and DNF. I was like, no, even if I have to walk it in, I don't care. Went around the corner, dropped down onto a trail that went by the side of a stream, and obviously it's Snowdonia, mountain water coming down to the sea. And I was like, well, my race is over. I may as well just sit in the water and cool down. So I literally took my pack off and just got in the water and just lay there in the water and I was like, I don't care how long it takes, just lay there for 10, maybe even 15 minutes. I just lay there, cooling down, splashing water on my head. Families walking by, wondering why this strange English guy was like lying fully clothed in his running gear in a river, and just lay there and just thought, I've got nothing to lose because, forget it, I'm not bothered about the race anymore. And then got out of the water, carried on, and just, it was almost like a miracle cure. Just sickness had gone, queasiness had gone. My pace wasn't what I wanted it to be, but I was running again, and actually ran all the way to the end then, and just and finished comfortably. And just taking that, I think, sort of, sometimes you can be in the midst of a race and just think, I haven't got time to do this. I don't have the time. I'm trying to get a position. I'm trying to get a time, whatever. But that sort of taught me a lesson that you have got the time, because if you don't make the time at that point, then you're just going to lose more time anyway. So it's money in the bank, really, isn't it? To stop and take stock of things and sort of readdress the issue you've got with temperature. Have you got any sort of things that if I didn't have that water available at that point, that cold mountain water that did the trick, have you got anything that you sort of recommend for if you feel that queasiness coming on or sickness? Have you got any sort of quick fixes for that? I know that's kind of like if you have got a quick fix for that, then you should be a very rich man.
Yeah. So with the queasiness, well, I mean, what I would say, I'd go back a few sort of steps. And one of the big things to see with a lot of ultra runners is they start a lot of races actually in a dehydrated state. So particularly in the heat, if you look at a lot of there's amazing research comes out of the Australian Institute of Sport, and they did loads in advance on heat acclimatization before the Olympics, and they were doing all kinds of things. But again, what's really important is making sure you fully hydrate before the race. And I'm guilty of this. I'll get up in the morning, I'll have a cup of coffee, I might have had a couple of beers the night before. I've not really thought about my hydration. So with that, if you go into your race in a dehydrated state, you're not coming back from that. It's just going to bring on dehydration even quicker. Whereas the day before a race and in the morning of a race, you can actually hypohydrate a little bit. So Australian Institute of Sport would put glycerol in their drinks a bit, which I wouldn't recommend because it can mess your stomach up royally. So probably wouldn't touch that. But drinking a little bit slowly, maybe even just putting a little bit of electrolytes in there, is going to retain that fluid, which is going to increase your blood plasma volume, which will help a little bit with thermoregulation as well. And what that will start to do is offset any early gut issues, because a lot of being nauseous, I mean, again, being nauseous is like, it's super complex. That's probably, out of all the GI issues, that's the most complex. But there's different reasons for feeling nauseous. So if you run really fast, again, it's a cytokine response from adrenaline and things like that. Whereas actually in an ultra, a lot of the time of being nauseous, so your nausea will have been the fact that you've been running a long time, in a dehydrated state. So you were hot, a lot of your blood will have gone to your working muscles, blood will have gone to your skin to try and keep you cool. It'll take that away from your gut, so it'll create gut damage. So the endothelial cells that line your gut, they'll start to get inflamed, which cause gaps, which means toxins can go into your blood, which can cause nausea. Your gut itself then can start backing up and cause nausea as well. The more heat you get, the more it's going to add to that, and you're not going to want to eat. And again, so that's the overall response to that. As soon as you start to cool down, actually your gut's pretty good at repairing itself. That sort of cytokine response will start to drop down a little bit as well. You might even start to get your appetite back. So that's where the kind of nausea comes from. So more than anything, it's doing all that stuff in advance to regulate your gut and make sure your gut's all right. So making sure you're properly hydrated is one of them, but also on the race, keeping cool. So getting in the water, you did exactly the right thing. The best thing you can do for cooling is, the way you cool is, your blood comes to the skin, delivers water, that evaporates, you cool down. So if you pour water over your head, in particular, if you pour water over your body, over your torso, it's got a bigger surface area, so that'll evaporate and you'll cool down much quicker. So you, by plunging yourself in the water, that'll have reduced your skin temperature, more blood will have gone back to your gut, it'll repair some of that damage, it'll make you start to feel a little bit better. So it's good. I've done that on a few lakes races where it's been really hot. I've passed a ton and gone, I'm not going to win it, I'm not even going to come top 10, so I go for a swim. And it's lovely and it's worth it, and it's it's adding to your race. But if it helps you in terms of thermoregulation, then it's a win-win.
Yeah, and I know I've kind of since then I've noticed the early signs of it, and then sort of kicked myself because I should have known better. So another example was of a race you'll know. So I did the Spine sprint race, the first summer they did it. Is that last summer? It was last summer, 2021. Yeah, and that started at midday, and that threw me. So every other ultra I've ever done has always been sort of either a morning or an early morning start. And I think the fact that it was a lunchtime start, the fact that it was a warmer day than they'd sort of anticipated, they'd said it was going to be raining and cloudy, but it's actually quite warm. I set off and I know now I set off in a dehydrated state, because the whole morning I was more concerned with getting there, faffing around with my kit, doing, checking in, getting all my stuff sorted. And I don't remember even having, a sip of even the stuff I had in my bladder, because I think I was thinking, I need to save that for the race because that's all I've got with me. And I know that there's only certain points where I can get water on the route. So I started in a dehydrated state. And I know that because I'd only gone from Edale, and I'd just gone, over the top of Kinder, and I started to feel queasy. And I'm like, there's no reason why I should be feeling queasy now at all. I haven't gone out too fast. I know I haven't. It's got to be dehydration. So I then guzzled all of the fluids that I had with me, thinking, I know that there's a certain point where I can get water on the route. Missed the guy with the water at Torside Reservoir. He was off talking to somebody. I ran through there looking for him. No water. Then I had to climb up over onto the moor, over the other side, thinking, I know there's a road crossing. I know that there's the transport cafe there that I can get water from, the small one, the roadside one.
Yeah.
And she'd run out of water, because obviously everyone else that had gone through in the morning, they just wiped her out of water because it was hot. So I was faced with being dehydrated, taken all of my fluids, got to her, asked for water. No, I haven't got any. What have you got? I've got cans of dandelion and burdock. So I took 2 cans of dandelion burdock, necked one and put one in my bladder and carried on. And then, no surprise, sort of a few miles later, I'm throwing up and literally can't keep anything down right through to the end of the race, and just went from seconds to dropped down to 6th place. So it wasn't as bad as it could have been, but I was kicking myself straight away because I knew that as soon as I started to feel queasy going over the top of Kinder, it's basically, like you say, you're in a hole already, and you're digging yourself into an even deeper hole, aren't you, by that point? What can you do at that point? Is there anything that you can do to recover it?
Yeah, I mean, you can shake it off. I mean, again, the best thing to do is basically slow down, drink a little bit at a time. I mean, if you drink really fast anyway, it'll just kind of flood you, and you'll tend to wee it out anyway. Or, there's a chance people can get hyponatremia just by downing loads and loads of water. So again, there's a bit of research that says quite a lot of people will get that during races, but never really even know about it. And it's nothing to worry about. It's only kind of a little bit, but that can kind of cause nausea as well. But yeah, you can kind of retrieve it, I suppose. And it's by, again, taking that time, drinking a little bit at a time, trying to keep cool as much as possible, just kind of keep it topped up. So the temptation would be kind of as you did, where you just down a load, but actually that's just going to make you feel worse. And again, means you might either wee it out or you potentially throw it all up, as you were saying. So again, it's just kind of resisting and just doing everything in moderation. As I was saying, I think I might have said hypohydration. I meant hyperhydration a few minutes ago. But yeah, if you hyperhydrate, particularly if it's going to be hot the day before, it should buy you a little bit of time. And then if you drink in the morning, but again, it's making sure it's kind of little and often, really. But yeah, so it's retrievable. Particularly, I wouldn't go drinking anything off Kinder. The top of Kinder, you cross the Kinder River, which is nice and brown. I'm not sure how good that water is. Very peaty.
Yeah, I have drank the peaty water before filtered, and even though it comes out clear, it still tastes. You shouldn't be drinking it as well. So I didn't do that at the time. Probably should have done that, and have been a bit better. I think since then I've looked into like you say, hyper hydrating, and got in touch with Precision Hydration, and they do give you like a survey on how much you sweat and stuff, and they'd recommended sort of preloading with electrolytes. What's your view on that then? So the day before, I had another summer race, and I knew it was going to be hot, so I sort of spent the day before the race sipping on electrolyte fluid, and then the next day of the race I was absolutely fine, and it worked out well. Is that the best approach to have, or should we sort of be just focusing on plain water the day before?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, there's not much research on that, and it probably doesn't really make any difference depending on the pace you drink in. So basically, if you were to drink like a massive bolus of water, your kidneys won't be able to deal with it all, so they would just wee it out. So you won't really be hydrating that much with it. If you add electrolytes to that, so fluid's always going to follow the salt. So it'll increase your blood plasma volume and you retain more water. Again, there's not much to say whether there's any difference, between that and just water if you're sipping it, if that makes sense. So I'm not too sure. I don't know how well it would work, but I do know that, as I say, Australian Institute of Sport used that a little bit, and they did that before their races in Tokyo, and even added glycerol, which helps you maintain water. So yeah, with electrolytes, I'd probably say it's a good idea. I probably wouldn't go overboard, but I'd say the main thing with that as well is, again, if you look at the sort of if you look at electrolytes as an additive to a drink, the main reason that kind of electrolytes were born, so to speak, in terms of like little tablets, was really to add flavor to a drink and add the salt to drive thirst, to basically make you drink more and keep hydrated. So it'll do that for sure. So if you do add a bit of electrolytes, you don't need to go over the top, but as I say, it'll start to drive you thirst. It'll keep you wanting to have a little drink, and it's not like just drinking plain water all day. So So I think there is some kind of ground in that, certainly if you want to hyperhydrate, sure. And again, that's going to delay the onset of dehydration. And also, even those, if you want to run a fast race, those early checkpoints, you might feel that you don't need to top your bottle up at them. You can kind of go straight past and save a little bit of time. Even obviously, try and hydrate all the way through, particularly if it's hot. But it's certainly a good tactic, sure. Again, Australian Institute of Sport, they were doing other stuff as well, which was giving their athletes slushes before races when it's particularly hot. And that was bringing down core body temperature by 0.7 degree, which is quite a lot. The further you can bring your body temperature down before the race, the more time it's going to take for that body temperature to come up, that core temperature, which is really important. So before a race, stay hydrated, stay in the shade, use as many cooling strategies as you can. Use a cold towel. I remember a few years ago, I was doing Sierre Zinal, and right at the bottom of the race, it was like early morning, it was red hot already, and I popped behind, I don't know, it looked like a shed, but I think it must have been an ice cream stall in the day when it opened. As soon as I went behind there, who was stood there? Kilian Jornet, getting out of the shade, but he knew what to do. He knew the fact that it's going to be a hot race, so stay in the shade as long as possible, keep cool as long as possible.
Yeah, that's great. I think, I suppose in this country, we don't always, maybe we get caught out a bit more in this country because we're not used to having, a hot baking weather all the time. Whereas, runners out on the continent probably have to face it on a weekly basis during the summer anyway. So they're probably a bit more climatized to it. I know I went out to Western States this year to do a bit of work on the live stream, and it'd been a long time. I don't think I'd certainly been in temperatures kind of that high, around 36 degrees, but I certainly hadn't run for hours and hours in it, which I was doing at the time for the, with the follow cam and everything. So, I managed okay, but I thought afterwards, I wasn't really ready for that, because I can't really think of a scenario where I could sort of prepare other than going and sitting in the sauna for running in that kind of heat. It took me by surprise. That's probably something as English runners that we face. What's your view of doing sort of things like that, sort of preparing yourself to acclimatise for a hot race by doing those interventions like saunas, and you can obviously get the infrared ones now and everything like that. Do you think that that's time well spent doing that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So there's quite a bit of research into that. And again, it says if you spend roughly about 60 to 90 minutes a day getting heat acclimatized for roughly about 10 days, then that will, it'll kind of make blood plasma volume go up. It'll be easier to run in the heat. And that will last for, I think I read something only recently that said it'll last for about 28 days, but the effects of it start to wear off after about 4 days. So you could spend 10 days getting heat acclimatized. If you were going to UTMB, say, you might go 2 days before and you'd be ready for the heat pretty much. The only thing with those 10 days is keeping a focus on what you're doing. So there's one thing about kind of sitting in a sauna, but actually you want to be doing a little bit of exercise while you're there. So it might be a case of, dragging an exercise bike into a sauna if your local gym will allow it, or setting up a hot room in your house, and putting a treadmill in there, something like that, and just doing some exercise in that time. Again, you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to bring your core temperature up too much, particularly if it's approaching like 40 degrees. You want to kind of switch it off. There's a little gadget now which is called Core. If you were to Google core and core temperature, like a lot of pro cycling teams are using it, and it's supposed to be pretty good. You put a heart monitor strap on, you attach it to yourself, and it'll tell you what your core temperature is. Again, I'm not sure. There's some validation studies on it which seem pretty positive, and I'm not sure how well it will actually read it, but it'll give you a bit of a ballpark figure. So if you are serious about acclimatization, then that's a good tool to have. Outside of that, there's some good research that's come out recently that says actually 10 days of taking hot baths work just as well as a sauna. So, get the Radox out, find a decent book, put some music on, rose petals, bath pearls, whatever you want. Get a red hot bath, sit in it, top it up for 90 minutes. Do that every day. That should help you heat acclimatize a little bit. I know there's certain runners who will, heat up a garage or a house, put a load of heaters in there, put the running machine in, but they'll also boil up some pans of water and put them in, try and increase the humidity as well. That works really well. But obviously, do a full risk assessment first before you're running around boiling hot pans of water. So again, with all these things, they all work really well. But it's just being careful not to overdo it. There's a bit of research came out only in the last few days, actually, which was talking about heat acclimatization. And it said, even though you put this in before your race, it also creates a lot of stress on your body. So if you're trying to heat acclimatize, you'll probably have poor night's sleep a lot of the time. You'll increase that stress load on your body as well. So as much as it pays off in terms of, getting you used and ready to the heat, there's a trade-off at the same time, which might be you going into your race with, a higher stress load than you might already have, which could lead to other things, which might lead to increased GI issues, could even lead to stuff like increased cramps as well. That's multifactorial, and part of that could well be poor sleep or lack of sleep in the days before a race. So with all these things, go on, sorry.
I was just going to say, it's hard to know whether you're doing more harm than good with something like that. I suppose, it's, you could probably say the same about certain training, certain workouts that you do before a race or something, that you add in that one final workout and afterwards you think, did I really need that? Have I just sort of put myself into a bit of a hole before a race? I suppose you've got to weigh up the pros and cons of whether it's worthwhile doing it or whether it's because your body only understands stress, doesn't it? It doesn't know where the stress is coming from. It just knows that your body is under stress. It doesn't know whether it's work, doesn't know whether it's training, doesn't know whether it's stress, family issues. It only knows stress, doesn't it? So
yeah, totally. That's a really great point. Yeah. So that's it. It doesn't differentiate between you having an argument with your wife and you going out and doing an ultra. So yeah, stress is stress as far as it's concerned, and that's all gonna, take its toll on your performance. But I suppose with all these things, the key thing is for anyone who's serious about, running an ultra and wanting to kind of compete or just, have a strong finish, testing all these things in advance. So with heat training, you might think, right, I'm going to get ready for this race, but actually it's worth trying it in advance, because for some people it might work really well. For other people, it might be a complete non-responder. It's the same as altitude. Some people get really sick at altitude. Some people are absolutely fine at altitude. So all these things, rather than leaving it up until the race and then putting all these strategies into play, then it's throughout the year, particularly in the off season, give it a go, because you've got nothing to lose. It might well be something you do and you set up a long run for yourself or see how you feel, or you do a bit of a throwaway race, which is, a cheap local race, or an LDWA event where it's not going to be competitive anyway. It might be a little bit less. So it's always worth checking out for sure. And then with the heat acclimatization, another thing with that is a lot of people are doing it because there's some, reported side effects that say, it'll increase your blood plasma volume as well, which is going to be a positive. So it could be really good, but again, it depends on the individual.
Yeah,
definitely.
That when you were talking about hot baths, that made me think of I heard a podcast that about some guys preparing for Western States and the heat and everything that they got with that race, and they were saying how Jim Walmsley, he didn't do it this year obviously, but one of the things he does is when he drives to the canyons, which is hot anyway, obviously, he'll drive with his windows up and no air conditioning, and he will sweat for like however long it takes to get there, like an hour's drive to get down there. Then he'll do his run in the heat, and then he'll drive back with in the same state with the windows up, absolutely like sweltering. And that's how he sort of gets his heat acclimatization. And then there was another runner that did that with hot baths. So he didn't have access to a sauna or anything like that, and he was purely just having hot baths for a few weeks before the race, and claimed that had sort of the same effects. I suppose you don't really need, you can do it on a budget, can't you? You don't need to have any fancy gear to be able to get those benefits.
Yeah, exactly. And the research that came out recently on hot baths actually said that you should go out and do your run, and then as soon as you finish your run, jump in the hot bath.
Yeah.
I mean, you could probably do it the other way around. I mean, if you basically wore too many clothes, or clothes that didn't breathe very well, I mean, you know, you cool down again, as we said, through sweat evaporating. But if you wear the wrong clothes, which doesn't allow sweat to evaporate and it drips, it's not having a cooling effect. So by wearing kind of restrictive clothes or non-wicking clothes, you know, your temperature's going to go up. So that's another method of just getting yourself hot. I mean, the downside of that is always going to be really uncomfortable, and more than anything, you're going to have probably a poor training session. It's not going to be very much quality, but I think you've got to dedicate that to thinking, right, this is about not me getting fitter as an athlete, or not me trying to make any specific train adaptation. It's me getting used to the heat. Interesting thing with that is it's also going to bring down rate of perceived exertion as well. A bit like going back to what we were saying about hydration. If you do a few runs where you go out dehydrated, that won't stop you getting dehydrated on a race. But what researchers found that, you know, initially, if you go out and you've not been dehydrated before, and on your race you get caught short and you miss, as you were saying, you missed the aid station, you got dehydrated, you might panic, your rate of perceived exertion will go up. You know, the whole thing will feel more stressful. If you have a few runs prior to that where you go out and you run and you make sure you're dehydrated, then actually you're able to deal with it a lot better come race day. So again, all these things are simply methods to habituate yourself to some of the potential race conditions and reduce the amount of stress on there, or, you know, reduce aspects of fatigue upon your body as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. This kind of sort of plays into, you know, dovetails into what I wanted to ask you next, and that was to do with fasted running and you know, like running in the morning. So what's the official term? Is it running, training low, in a low state? So you're training in, you know, low glycogen availability.
So there's sleep low, train low, which is in the morning. So I mean, fasted state really is basically training with low glycogen. So if we kind of take a step back, so, you know, glycogen is the way your muscles store glucose, carbohydrates. You know, glycogen, when you're running, is, you know, is your body's preferred fuel, really. In terms of fasted running, I mean, the research is interesting. So a lot of the fasted running really kind of, I mean, it's been around forever, fasted running, to be honest. But, you know, it really sort of came to prominence with a paper by Sam Impey a few years ago called Fuel for Work Required, which showed that if you go out on a fasted run, or a low glycogen run, let's say, you know, the stress response from your body will essentially get your body to produce more what's called PGC1 alpha, which is a master regulator of mitochondria. So your body will start to produce more mitochondria, which is better than oxidating fat for fuel. So a lot of people are like, right, and then like that became really, really popular, but people read into it that it was all about not having carbs, where actually it was about periodizing carbohydrates. Because historically, you know, for an ultra runner, people would say, you know, textbooks would say high volume, you should be on 10 grams of carbs per kilo. And don't know, what am I now? 73 kilos. Yeah. So if you think about that, 730 grams of carbs a day, it's a serious amount every day. I would struggle to get that in. You know, that'd be aggressively eating carbs for everything. So there's a periodized way of it where actually you don't need to fuel every run. If you're going out and having an easy run, actually fat is going to take care of that because you're going to be at low intensity. It's only if you're going to really push it on the hills, up the pace, or do something of longer duration, then you really need your glycogen stores topped up with carbs. So in terms of fasted running then, so again, we have carbohydrates, we top up our glycogen stores, both in our muscles, in our liver. In our muscles, it locks the glycogen in, okay? That's in there. So the day before, I take a load of carbs in, that'll fuel that run. So if it's a marathon, what my marathon pace might be, it lasts me for about 2 hours, and most people for that. Then it's gone. And then I've only got exogenous carbohydrates coming in, so the carbs I eat, which, you know, go into my bloodstream through my liver, keep my liver glycogen topped up. So if you think about fasted training, the idea of that is that you deplete all your carbs. So the carbs in your liver, carbs in your muscle, you go out, there's no carbs in there to fuel the work. So the stressor on your body, you know, uses more fat, so it trains your body to use fat, but that stress response also tells your body to create more mitochondria, so it's able to utilize fat better, if that makes sense. What I would say, it was a paper that came out at the start of the year by Ricardo Costa, who used loads of data and loads of research, and he's based at Monash, who are the same people as I was saying, that do all the amazing stuff on GI, and he's probably one of a handful of really great researchers doing stuff in this ultra space. But he looked at all the research and all the data and the way that changed. He basically said ultra runners do not need to do any fasted runs because they're doing it already. So that fuel for the work required. The idea of that initially about low glycogen running was about having an empty tank and going out and running on that. But then, you know, after a few years, as more and more people researched it, it changed a little bit to what became the glycogen threshold hypotheses. So, you know, kind of your glycogen stores in your body, what people have come to realize in terms of, you know, it's not just a store of glycogen. Actually, it's like a fuel gauge. And as soon as that starts to dip, it sends loads of signals around your body to do different things. So as soon as, you know, your glycogen dips under a certain amount, you don't have to empty that tank. It'll start to make some of those it'll respond within your body and start to make some of those different changes in terms of, you know, how your metabolic systems are working, whether you're burning carbs or fat, producing more mitochondria. So the idea was, you know, rather than the amount of glycogen you're starting with, it's actually about the amount of glycogen you're finishing with, if that makes sense. So if you look at ultra runners, and he looked at ultra runners, by the very nature of ultra running, everyone goes out on long runs. You know, quite recently, there's been a few papers which have completely dismissed the idea of glycogen sparing. So ultra runners wanting to, you know, go out and train themselves to be able to burn fat better. The whole idea of that was very much to spare glycogen so you wouldn't bonk. But actually, the glycogen in your muscles, your body will use it regardless. Doesn't matter how much carbs you're putting in, you know, they'll use it. The more glycogen you've got in your muscles, the more your body will start to use that glycogen. As soon as that glycogen dips, then your body will start to switch and burn more fat. There's nothing you can do about that. You can spare your liver glycogen though. So if you keep taking on carbs, it'll spare that liver glycogen, and actually that'll regulate your blood glucose, and it'll stop you from bonking.
Which one goes? Sorry for cutting in. Which one goes down first? Does one go down? Does your liver glycogen go down quicker than your muscle glycogen, or is it even, or, you know, how does that work?
That's a really good question, actually. Not 100%. I've read some research, but I'm not 100%, so I won't want to commit to it on here. But if you don't eat anything, what's going to happen is both going to go down. Actually, it'll be muscle glycogen, because what will happen is, so muscle glycogen will go, but your liver will still be trying to maintain homeostasis in terms of your blood glucose. So your liver will go through the process of gluconeogenesis, which is a bit like, you know, at the end of Back to the Future, when Doc Brown comes from the future in the car, and he's got that food blender on the back, and he can chuck anything in it, and it'll create energy.
Yeah.
Gluconeogenesis is a bit like that. So gluconeogenesis in your liver, it will take lactate, it'll take protein, it'll basically take, you know, all those different things and turn those into glucose to regulate your blood glucose. So for instance, if you were to go and do a fasted run, actually you'd have a greater amount of protein breakdown than you would if you were eating, because again, it's going to break down your muscle more for energy because it's not got those exogenous carbohydrates coming in. So does that make sense? So off the top of my head, I would say it'll be muscle glycogen first and then liver glycogen. And the idea is to, you know, keep your liver glycogen topped up so you're not bonking. So you're always going to have that steady flow of glucose into your blood. Going back to what I was saying about fasted running and ultra runners. So a lot of that research on the glycogen threshold hypotheses. So if you're an ultra runner and you go out and you go on a, you know, let's say a 5 or 6 hour run, might be a steady run, actually probably 3 or 4 hours or so, you know, whatever glycogen you've got in your body will start to use that, yeah, and that'll be depleted. So at the end of your run, you'll be in a low glycogen state. So without even trying to do a fasted run, you will have already done it. And from what I've seen about ultra runners, I did a study recently with 33 experienced ultra runners. We looked at loads and loads of different bits of data, but part of what came out of that is I realized that a lot of people simply weren't eating enough every day. A lot of people weren't even meeting the resting metabolic rate, which is really dangerous. It's going to lead to illness, lead to injury, but also the average amount of carbohydrates a lot of the ultra runners were eating a day. Across the whole group, it was 4.2 grams per kilogram, which isn't very much at all. You know, if you're training for, let's say, 50 miles or more each week, you know, a lot of those runs, you're going to be in a low glycogen state, particularly if you're doing reps, whether it's on a track, whether it's on a road, whether you're doing hill repeats, if you're doing kind of long, you know, continuous training runs. So there's loads and loads of parts of your week when you're going to be running in a low glycogen state. And what that's going to do is it's going to start kickstarting your body to say, right, you need to produce more mitochondria and actually you become a better fat burner. So even without trying, you're able to do it. There's some research came out recently by a guy called Jeff Rothschild who did loads of stuff with AI and looked at loads of data all around this. And what he realized is, you know, even before you go out on a fasted run, let's say a low glycogen run, you can still have a full meal because your body's not going to it's not going to turn that glucose into glycogen quick enough. And all it's going to do is just, you know, go into your blood circulation rather than into your glycogen pool. So you'll still get to that low glycogen state. So actually, a lot of the research now on that, you realize that ultra runners are doing it already. And actually, if you start to runs over an hour and a half, if you start to feed yourself on those runs, you know, you'll have less of a cortisol response as well. You'll also, you know, you won't break down amino acids quite as much and protein. So you'll preserve lean tissue a little bit more. You become, and again, this is a term that gets thrown around a lot, you become a lot more metabolically flexible. You know, that's a term which was borrowed from, you know, studies on diabetes, but it's used in exercise all the time as a term which allows your body to actively, you know, switch between using glucose as a substrate and fat as a substrate. So you've got in your body pyruvate dehydrogenate, which PDH, which basically, you know, will transport, you know, glucose through into your mitochondria. If you're trying to train your body just to burn fat, it'll downregulate PDH, and it means you won't be able to absorb carbohydrates to the same state. or as much, which, means you're not going to be able to use your fuel well enough, but also it could create GI problems at the same time. So it's quite sort of, it's quite a complex matrix of things which are going on in there. But in terms of fasted running, yeah, there's potential for it, but I probably wouldn't go out of my way to do it, if that makes sense. So James Morton, who had his name on that Sam Impey paper, Fuel for Work Required. James Morton is a professor at Liverpool, John Moores. He does loads. He's an amazing sports nutritionist. He was doing loads of fasted stuff with the Sky team when they were winning all the yellow jerseys, and he worked with Liverpool Football Club. Even he says fasted running is the icing on the cake, basically. So you probably, by doing it, you're probably making marginal gains. And for me, I'm a sports nutritionist, but what I always say about sports nutrition is it's not a magic bullet. Yeah, what you should be getting right is your training, and if you put all your effort into your training and get your training program right, then you'll make massive gains in that. If you've got a good, strong nutrition plan to support that, and you're getting the right nutrition in, then that'll enhance your training, and actually you'll get the best out of your training. You'll be able to make those adaptations, delay injury, delay fatigue, improve recovery, stop illness, stop injury a little bit more. But all these things kind of go hand in hand. But as I say, with fasted training, I probably wouldn't put so many eggs in that basket, and I would rather think about what I'm trying to get out of that training session. If someone did want to do a fasted training session, what I would say is, yeah, if you're comfortable with that and it works for you, or you just don't like eating before your session, or you've got to get up early, and it's either do a session fasted or don't do a session at all because you've got to go to work, then certainly do it. It's not going to harm you, but try and keep it under an hour and just keep it as a super slow session. There's slight different response to it as well between men and women. A lot of research, as a lot of sports science research has been in the past, has been mostly on, university age, amateur athletic sort of men. For women, it's slight different response in terms of, fasted training, fasted running. If I was a female athlete, I'd probably steer clear of it. But if you're an ultra runner, male or female, you're doing it anyway.
Yeah, aren't females more predisposed to fat burning as a fuel substrate anyway?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
thought I'd heard.
I was reading a paper recently that, it's quite an old paper, but that was looking at the difference between men and women. It was looking at, men were taking kind of 90 grams of carbs an hour, whereas actually women were taking 60, getting pretty much the same results. So women are much better at burning fat than men. Again, it's not to say that women should avoid carbs, but actually, the structure, particularly in terms of fasted training, there would be a different response between men and women. So I would be more cautious of that as a female athlete, particularly when it comes to energy as well. There's some research recently that's actually come out that said a lot of sort of energy deficits, particularly things like REDs, if you're familiar with REDs, like that isn't just related to energy, but it's related to carbohydrate intake as well, and cutting back on carbs. So again, that's about that's related to bone injuries, particularly in female athletes. So that's certainly something to look out for as well. So I'd probably give it a bit more of a wide berth as a female athlete.
Yeah, it was an interesting point that you made about the fact that even if you're eating in the morning before a run, your body hasn't had a chance to process that food and turn it into energy anyway. So you're already in that state of being, training low anyway. So that's
exactly.
A great point. I've not thought of that.
And before. Remember, all these are about having, the food. It's about having carbs, and then you get that insulin response. But actually, even if you wanted to go on, if you wanted to actually do a fasted run, and you were hungry, you can have an omelette, you can have protein, because you're not going to get that same response you'll get a bit of an insulin response, but it's not going to, increase your blood glucose the same way as carbohydrates would. So there's always kind of ways of getting around it. Yeah. But I'd say if you're an ultra runner and you're competitive and you're doing kind of high volumes each week, then I can guarantee you're doing like low glycogen running already.
Yeah, you're already doing it, aren't you, because of the high volume?
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Just finally then, what this a subject that, a bit of a tricky subject, that people wanting to lose body fat when they are training. What's a safe way for people to be able to lose weight if that is a concern? Because you do genuinely have people that are wanting to focus on that. They know they've got a bit of extra body fat they want to lose to make them a bit quicker or to be able to climb and more efficiently. What advice do you give people to do that in a safe way, in a controlled sort of dieting environment?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. And again, it's quite a complex one. But with that, I mean, the first thing what I would do is question. And again, a lot of clients I see, the first thing they say is, "Oh, I want to lose weight." I'm like, how much do you weigh? And they'll tell me, and then they'll tell me the height. I'm thinking, it's not, you can't really go any less, So I think, Pete, you've got to question why someone would want to lose body weight already. And again, is it pressure? Is it a club mate or a coach or someone saying, "Oh, you'd be faster if you lost a bit of weight"? Because again, there's a lot of old school attitudes around which are all about losing weight. And actually, it can be really dangerous. And this is where, particularly in female athletes, we get reds, from people just not eating enough, period stops, get bone injuries, osteoporosis in later life, can bring on cardiovascular issues, can bring on bouts of depression even. It can be really serious. Those same markers you don't see in men, but it's because the research just isn't there in men yet. But you will get some of those kind of same conditions. And, I see athletes who are like, "Oh, my training's not going very well, seem to have plateaued for a year." I'm like, "Okay, do me a food diary, let's see what you eat." Then they're eating 1900 calories a day, yeah, and running 10 miles a day as well, when really they should probably be on about 3.5 to 4,000 calories a day. So what happens there is the body will just start to store fat. It'll downregulate your metabolic rate. It'll start switching off certain systems like reproductive health. So your libido will go, because actually your body will say, "Well, in the immediate future, I don't need that. So I'm going to switch it off to store energy." So your body will try and conserve that energy, which has, it'll stop testosterone in women. It's estrogen, which has a knock-on effect to bone health. So this is what happens when people often go on a crash diet. So if you want to lose weight, as I say, question why you want to do that. Yeah. Is it because you want to climb faster? Is it because you want to look better, have better body composition? But I'd question if you really, really need to do that. Second one is, if you got to a point and you spoke to a sports nutritionist or someone else, or you realize, you've checked your weight against other people and your BMI, or you've got to an unhealthy weight and you say, "Right, I really need to lose weight," do it in a sensible, structured way. So, try to maybe lose, knock off, depends on your weight already, but the bigger you are, the easier it's going to be to drop weight. The smaller you are, the more difficult it's going to be, and it's going to change for everybody as well. So you might want to knock off 500 calories from your diet a day, or you might look at the absolute top end, 1% of body fat per week. Okay, or ideally about 0.7% of body fat per week. That makes sense. So if I was 3 kilos lighter and I was 70 kilos, I'd want to be losing sort of, perhaps 0.7 of a kilo each week, which is still quite a lot. Ideally, I would try and ease off a little bit more and just aim for sort of 0.5 kilo a week. Yeah, which is still 2 kilos a month. It's quite a lot. The thing with that is, you'll start to, where diets don't work, and there's loads and loads of different reasons to this. So first of all, a crash diet, resting metabolic rate will go down, so actually you need less food then. So whatever you put yourself on calorie wise, you'll reach a plateau, because your body will start to regulate itself for that. So you've almost got to kind of keep bringing it down and keep weighing yourself and checking on yourself. Crash diet, probably quarter of that weight to 20% of that weight, let's say, will be muscle. And that's, you don't want to lose that. So the less you can cut off your, if you've got 6 months and you want to lose 5 kilos, that's great. You've got plenty of time to do that and you won't lose that muscle. Whereas if you're trying to lose a ton of muscle in a ton of weight in a couple of months, then a load of muscle is going to lose. You're going to lose a load of muscle with that, and that'll reduce your power then. So all that work you've been doing, trying to strengthen those muscle fibers, develop all those training adaptations, you're ready to kind of get rid of all that, chuck it out the window to maybe try and save a little bit of weight. So you've got to kind of measure it up a little bit. If you're really serious about losing weight, what I would say is eat more protein to start with. So if you're an ultra runner, I would say in terms of protein intake, you want about 1.8 grams per kilogram a day. So I'm not sure what your weight is. For me, it's about 120, 125 grams of protein a day, which ideally I would spread 20 to 25 grams every 3 to 4 hours, either on a meal or a snack. The problem is a lot of people are meeting that really easily, but it's all in their evening meal. A little bit of it's at lunch, none of it's at breakfast. So spread that out over the day. If you're really serious about losing weight, up it to 2.2 or 2.4 grams a day. That'll help you preserve your muscle mass and lean tissue. It's more satiating as well, so it'll fill you up a little bit more. If you put a bit of resistance exercise in as well, that's a great way to lose weight. Obviously, don't overdo it, but get down to your local gym. You don't have to be lifting heavy weights. You can do more reps and light weights. Really, really good way to lose weight. Also, good to build up strength for running. Stop injuries. I'm just trying to think what else off the top of my head. Obviously, look at what you're eating. So energy dense foods. So, foods, you might think you've got a really healthy diet and you're like, right, I'm eating 3 avocados a day. Avocados are really energy dense. It's like 250, 300 calories in each. So straight away, you've just done 900 calories, which, that could be half your resting metabolic rate for the whole day done in a bit of a dip. I'm only saying this because I just ate 2 avocados for my dinner, as well as my actual dinner, because they're not, because it's fat, it's nice, it's creamy, it's not very satiating, it's really, really easy to eat. And you think, it's not bad for me because, it's a health food. Just try and top up your plate with more whole grains, more greens, more veg. Again, they're much more satiating. As I said, put boiled potatoes on your plate, even though they're a bit boring, rather than mash. You're going to eat less. So they're the easiest ways to lose weight. And then what I do with clients, I do skin fold analysis. So what we often do, I look at the different skin fold sites, take skin fold measurements, we'll write those down, we'll compare it to other athletes, and then we'll do it a month or 2 months later with a weight measure. And then we know exactly how much muscle is being lost to how much fat is being lost. If we do that a little bit early, we can kind of grab it and start to tweak things and change things pretty early on. There's some other theories around as well. So obviously there's a famous sort of, there's the weight loss through carbohydrates, the whole Gary Taubes thing. And then there's, it's about energy expenditure more than anything. And then there's, through kind of the calorie deficit, which is a sort of Kevin Hall school of thinking, I suppose. Again, like different diets will work differently for different people. And a lot of what comes into sports nutrition, in terms of people trying to lose weight or go on kind of crazy diets and stuff like that, that is research that comes from most of the time obese sedentary males. If you're a runner, you're an athlete, you are not an obese sedentary male. Your body is very, very different than theirs. So, you know, that diet that's being applied to them, you know, I wouldn't apply that same diet to you. I mean, I would simply keep running, you know, thinking about eating through the day and just reducing your calories a little bit and taking it really slow and really gradual. Don't go on a massive crash diet, you know, because it's just gonna lead to major issues, really. Anything else I can say on that? Again, I suppose the other thing is, as soon as if you go for a run, yeah, as soon as you start to expend energy, your body will look at ways to start to conserve energy then. So people think, because I'm a runner, I'm going to lose a load of weight. Yeah. It doesn't work like that. So you might get in actually like, God, that was a tough run. I'm going to have a can of Coke and a donut. Again, it's quite an obvious thing to say, but people reward themselves a bit more, or you might be a little bit more hungry. So you might eat a little bit more, you might snack, and then you might have a main meal. But also, you know, your body's going to conserve energy then as well. So, you know, instead of getting up to turn the TV over, you use a remote. I mean, like, or I don't know, instead of fidgeting, you might stop fidgeting. So your body's trying to find these ways of not expending more calories, because again, it's always trying to find homeostasis, particularly in terms of energy. So even though you've gone on that run, you know, you might not have got rid of as many calories as you thought. And also, whatever you might have done in that time when you were going for a run, you're replacing whatever that was, which might have been another activity. So it's a really sort of tight balance. So again, you've really got to look at your diet. But again, my top advice would be do a bit of resistance exercise, up your protein intake. You know, on those days when you're not having heavy training sessions, yeah, down regulate how many carbs you eat as well. You know, on the day before you're going out and doing a big run session, or the day before you're doing an interval session, you might want to up your carbs then, which is a periodized approach. But actually, if you've got an easy trail run the following day, when you know it's just going to be quite literally a run in the park with your mates, you know, you don't need to eat as many carbs that day before, because you're going to be mostly using fat. So again, you can sort of start to tone all these things down and periodize it a little bit. And again, try these things out. But the one thing I would say is, you know, do it slowly, do it gradually. Don't sort of jump on any crash diet, because it'll just lead to disaster and usually a loss of power, and increasing the chance of injury, and also increasing the chance of GI distress. So you end up DNFing on your next race. So I hope that answers your question in a roundabout way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It makes complete sense that obviously we know, don't we, that crash diets, you know, they work in the short term sometimes, but people that lose weight and keep it off are ones that lose it gradually in a healthy kind of controlled environment. So yeah, absolutely. Great advice.
I mean, with anyone, you could quite easily go in. You know, if I was working with a combat athlete now, I reckon I could easily say, right, in 4 days, we could get your weight to drop by 3 or 4 kilos. All you do is you put them on a low residue diet, so low salt, low fiber, which reduces blood volume, reduces bulk, won't hold on to as much water, so you're reducing loads of weight in the system. Cut out all the carbs, so you've just cut out about probably, I don't know, 500 to 700 grams of weight, but for every gram of carbs, that holds on to about 2 grams of water, give or take. So you've just released about 1 kilo there. Get them in a hot bath or a sauna, dehydrated, you lose a load of weight there. So it's pretty easy to do, but all those things are going to be really detrimental when it comes to race day. And this is why quite often you will see boxers passing out after a weigh-in, because their sports nutritionist has got to work really hard then to get them rehydrated, to get all that glycogen back in the body, to get them ready for when they go in the ring. So again, body weight is it's a really tough one, because if we look at it as body weight, it's saying something very different than if we're looking at that as, you know, lean muscle mass, or how much body fat you're actually losing. So it's kind of, it's, you know, pulling away all those different compartments and seeing where that weight is actually going from.
Yeah, so there's so much going on. It's not just a simple case of reducing this, reducing that. It's like a concert of things going on all at the same time, isn't it? Rather than just single things that you can take away or add in that make a difference.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's interesting. So I'm aware that it's getting really late and you've been working right up until we started recording. So I don't want to keep you too long. But have you got anywhere that people can sort of get in contact with you if they want any personalized nutrition advice, or any plans or anything like that? Where do people go to look at what you do?
Yeah, cool. So if you go on Instagram, I'm at ultra.endurance.nutritionist. If you want to check out my website, it's www.performancegains.co.uk, or if you want to drop me an email, it's paul@performancegains.co.uk. I'm on Twitter at sportnutrient. I'm on Facebook, but does anyone go on Facebook anymore? I hardly ever go on it, to be honest. So Instagram, Twitter, website, email, they're all good places to catch me. I do like free consultations to people to start off with, to have a chat, and then kind of other plans. So yeah, if anyone wants to get in touch, feel free, even if you just want a bit of a chat about running. Always happy to talk.
Brilliant. I appreciate you coming on and giving us all these insights. Great. Hopefully the viewers and the listeners will be able to take away something really practical from this. So I appreciate you coming on and giving us your time. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, cheers for the invite, Sam. Much appreciated, and keep up the good work with the podcast.
Yeah.
You had a really good range of guests. It's really interesting to follow, actually, so that's cool.
Well, cheers. Thanks for paying attention.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, look forward to listening.
Thanks, mate.